It's a pleasure to have our speaker, Abhijit Chanda, who's a science communicator, a writer, public speaker, and founder of Rationable, which promotes science and skepticism through the website www.berationable.com. He has a YouTube channel, Rationable, and a podcast, the Rationable Podcast. He has interviewed prominent scientists, skeptics, and atheists covering topics such as psychics, archaeology, health policies, neurology, religion, and food, while also doing deep dives into alternative medicine, health, and food fads. His interviews have included many luminaries in all of these fields. He's been a guest on the Skeptic Zone podcast. He's been interviewed for the Skeptical Inquirer magazine and spoken at many events around the world, including the Pub 2022 in Australia, Skeptical 2022 for the Bay Area Skeptics, and Dragon Con in 2020. And with that, I would like to present Abhijit Chanda. Take it away.
Hello. Thank you so much, Fred, for that introduction, and thank you all so much for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure. Every single time I do speak to whatever audience it is, whether it's Indian or Australian or anywhere in the world, really, it is an absolutely delightful experience when we can get to meet so many new people and and I get definitely put. This time, unfortunately, I'm not in the best of health. When I spoke to Dawn last, I think I had a bit of a cold, and from there on, I've had a little bit of a viral fever. So, but I'm not taking anything for it, if you know what I mean. So if I pause for a second or just have a cough or a sneeze or something of that sort, please excuse me, bear with me. I will get through it all. I promise you that. But I've also had to, kind of subdue my ambitions for this conversation and for what I'm going to present to you, because I haven't really been in the shape to kind of really do some of the intense research that I really wanted to do. But I hope this is going to be an interesting and educational session for all of us. So here we shall go. Shall we go? We shall. Right. So I have actually, so of course, I mean, I'm sure you've all been familiar with the term of Ayurveda, which of course it has, it has originated in India. And the first thing that I wanted to understand after Fred got in touch with me was, why is the US becoming more fond of alternative medicine? And at first I thought maybe that's because your system of medicine is just horribly, well, it's not broken. It's just been designed in a way that it isn't thoroughly, it's not the best way to do things. Unfortunately, I don't know if there is a best way to provide medical attention to an entire population, an entire country. But what is happening in the US, and from everything that I've read and heard, it is extremely troublesome to especially when you see that primarily the entire thing is being controlled by the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies, and the patients are a far off thought when it comes to actually putting the entire plan together. So when I looked into this, I was actually quite surprised that it wasn't the medical system that people were avoiding. It was just primarily because the traditional forms of medicine that they had come in contact with actually connected with their own values and beliefs and their philosophical orientations towards health and life. So this is something that surprised me, and that means that the indoctrination that people have faced of getting into alternative medicine is far deeper and more troublesome than we might have previously given it credence for. Either way, the facts need to be shared. And the scary thing, especially as you can see on your screens, among those who have heard or read about alternative medicine, the ones who have investigated it a lot are actually using that not only along with their regular course of treatment, but they're actually getting into it instead of their regular course of treatment, which of course is extremely dangerous. And this is, and which gives us a lot more impetus, I would think, to actually go out there and fight the pseudoscience about alternative medicine, which has been basically taking over the world for goodness knows what reason. I think personally, it's probably because we're all taking modern medicine for granted. And Fred had also sent me a few of these websites, which are from people in your area who are actually providing these treatments to you. And of course, it's all very happy and light and flowers and nature. And of course, these are all coming together as a representation of the naturalistic fallacy, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, which is basically the logical fallacy that because something is natural, that makes it much better. So we see a lot of things about calming, energy, naturopathic, and all these healing, energetic healing, etc. So what exactly do these mean? What is energy anyway? The first and most important thing that we have to notice is that according to these people, these service providers in your area, and of course, these Reiki practitioners and therapeutic touch people, is that we have this life energy within us. This is basically vitalism, where there's this life force that emanates through us, and it has a lot of little points where it centers, where it flows, where it stops flowing, and it's basically filling us with this life force called prana in Ayurveda and ki or chi in Chinese traditional medicine. Now, when it comes to the Chinese side of things, which I am not going to delve too deep into because I think somebody who is more well versed in the Chinese forms of traditional medicine or practices, I would rather say, instead of calling them medicine, is is basically we have qigong or tai chi, which I'm thoroughly fond of, to be honest. It's very relaxing. It's very soothing. It's also not as easy as it looks, even though you're moving very slowly and you're supposed to be moving the chi around you. It is also very good for maintaining stability, for strengthening your lower body, for strengthening your posture, and for doing other things in similar fashions. Healing touch and therapeutic touch is basically, it's just a very light massage that people do to align your chi and get it to flow through your body. And also reflexology is where they focus on just the feet. And I've had reflexology done. It is extremely nice. Every time I want to just relax or something like that, treat myself to a nice massage or something, instead of going all the way, you can just get your feet massaged. It is heavenly. And of course, we've got Reiki, where, of course, the practitioner doesn't have to touch you at all. It's very COVID friendly. And basically, they're kind of hands off. They're not really masseurs, but they're Reiki practitioners. And of course, then there's acupuncture, which in Ayurveda has also been adopted into acupressure, which is just pressing without the needles going in. But these dots that you see on the screen along this human model are basically the meridian lines and points which are dictated in acupuncture. Little pro tip here, those points don't always match from practitioner to practitioner or from school of thought to school of thought. They can pretty much be everywhere or anywhere for that matter. Just stick a needle in the next person, and instead of having some sort of voodoo reaction, you might actually be giving them a cure for a headache. Now, of course, a lot of this has been very well documented about acupuncture and Reiki and therapy, and even yoga also has a lot of supposed benefits when it comes to um, traditional therapies and health. Now, therapeutic touch, I did find out, was not as ancient, or even Reiki is not as ancient as a lot of us might think. If you think of traditional Chinese medicine, it must be going back thousands of years, but it was actually invented by this guy called Mikao Usui in the 1920s. This is not as ancient as we thought it was. This is the 1920s. This is just a couple of decades before my parents were born. It's relatively new when you're talking about these treatments, etc. And apparently he went away on a retreat for about 20, 21 days, and he suddenly came up with this technique, which somehow did align with the traditional ideas of qi. And he made quite a healthy song and dance about it for the next couple of years in life. Sorry, one sec, stepping ahead of myself. The interesting thing about Mikao Usui is that he died at age 60, which, being a fantastic magical healer, isn't doesn't really come across as, it doesn't make sense. Like, if you're supposed to be like this genius healer, I would have thought you'd be able to stretch your years a little bit beyond that. Um, Unfortunately, he also had two children, one of them who died in their 20s. So definitely wasn't going after the father. It's sad. I don't want to make fun of it. Genuinely, it's not something to be made fun of. But it does give one a little pause when thinking, was this guy legit? But of course, we all know what energy really is. Energy is not some vacuous life force that is, that is more Jedi-like than in that is actually flowing through our bodies, but it is the ability to do work. As we all know, we have many different forms of energy that essentially is the potential or ability to do some work, whether it's to move an object, whether it's to create other forms of energy, or to basically change itself into other forms of energy, or whether it's chemical, or or thermal, or etc., etc. So we all know this quite effectively. Honestly, I think this whole therapeutic touch thing is just because of what the kids are watching on TV these days. These Marvel and anime with people blowing up and fighting each other. It's like it's fairy tales. But what I really want to dig into in today's conversation is Ayurveda, because this is something that is not only an alternative medicine that is taking over India and has become a central part of our belief system, but it is going to many other countries across the world, not just the US, but across Canada and Europe, Australia, and it is creating quite the mess. So I really wanted to dig into this, and so that I can give you a little bit of in-depth perspective of the origins of Ayurveda and where they come from, so that you can make better choices and you can tell your friends and family about this so that they can make better choices when it comes to their health. Now, Ayurveda basically means the science of life, or the knowledge of life. And it even has a deity, as you would guess, because in India, everything's got a deity. And his name was Dhanvantari. So, Dhanvantari. I It's okay. You don't have to remember that. It's barely even something that is spoken of these days in connection to this. But one of the really interesting facts about Ayurveda is one of its early practitioners, Susruta. His name is definitely easier to pronounce. He actually pioneered some forms of surgery. For example, rhinoplasty, using the skin from a flap of skin from the forehead to basically reconstruct a nose, especially because in those times, if you were a form of punishment was to cut a person's nose off. So with a sword or some other form of sharp device. So these forehead flap surgery became extremely common, and he had pioneered several other forms of surgery, which are actually quite amazing. These are legitimate surgeries that did well and were used repeatedly with good effects. And he actually wrote an entire book about his medical practices called the Susruta Samhita, which basically outlines the medical practices of the time using the Ayurvedic preparations, the different herbs and medicines that were created, and of course, his surgical techniques and the surgical instruments that he used. So, as you can see, there's quite a variety of them that they had put together different types of forceps, different types of scissors, and different types of needles for sewing, an injury back together, or even a surgical incision back together. And he did a lot of work. He even pioneered certain ways of actually not cutting a person open after death, because that's illegal. That was illegal at that time, to do an autopsy. But what he would do is he had figured out a way of basically letting the flesh, trigger warning, letting the flesh fall off the body in a safe manner without anything eating away at it, so that he could then separate all the flesh from the bones and the muscles and kind of pick away things, not using a knife, but with using a very strong brush, which was basically able to peel away the different tissues which he was able to understand and investigate. So as you can see, this guy knew what he was doing. He was definitely way ahead of his time. But that's about where Ayurveda kind of stops making sense. Because as you can see, these Pancha Mahabhutas, which are basically the five elements that make up the universe and make up the human body, we can find analogies, absolutely. But the different elements of ether, air, water, fire, and earth are all these different elements that come together to form not only the universe, but the human body. And so, as you can see, this is very closely related to the humors that allopathy, or at least early medicine practitioners, used to think was actually legitimate, which was, the four humors of the yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood, which also had these connections to the four elements of the world, which was earth, air, fire, and water. And as you can see in this image, this is one of the early images of a person having, with bloodletting happening. So there would be bloodletting, there would be, made to vomit or, create nausea or diarrhea or many other forms of getting fluids out of your system, because they thought that this is what was needed to rebalance your body and bring these different uh, elements back into balance, which they thought was the root cause of disease. And so, as you can see in this little outlay, we won't go too deep into this, but these combinations of earth and water, ether and air, fire and water are three different types of doshas, or which are called different forms of this humoral imbalance. And there is a long, deep description of what each form of imbalance is called and what it leads to. This also kind of looks like this whole endomorph, metamorph, mesomorph body types, which I'm sure is only coincidental. But, when it comes to showing a body of a person who has a certain type of dosha, it also shows what happens when it's in balance, what happens when it's out of balance. And there's a lot of description here, which is what all of Ayurveda is based on. But the problem is they didn't know how to check themselves. This is, of course, long before germ theory happened. On the right, we can see that is Susruta's statue. Um, but we can see that this is pre-scientific. We didn't know that we didn't know about germs back then. And what was happening was this was trial and error, But when you don't realize that you have your own inbuilt biases, your cognitive biases like confirmation bias, whether how are you separating all the different variables, which is what we do, using randomized control trials, and we do those randomized control trials again and again and again, get them peer reviewed so that other people can look at it and try and pick out your mistakes. That is how we have learned to do medicine, but they didn't know those systems back then. It was simply trial and error. And these trial and error mechanisms have actually uh, led to a lot of misuse of science when it comes to actually promoting these medicines. So they use the same, scams and these excuses to make accommodations for the lack of actual verifiable data. So you have Ayurveda that treats the whole body instead of the symptoms, as they say about naturopathy and homeopathy and everything else, when it is clearly not the case. Because if they don't understand the root cause, how are they going to treat it? How do they know that hepatitis has five different causes or three different causes? How would they know that each cancer is different? It's a group of diseases, not one disease. How would they know that meningitis is different from typhoid? How would they know the differences there? So, and yet they're just coming up with different ideas like quantum physics. Like Deepak Chopra. Have you guys heard of Deepak Chopra? Anybody want to raise their hands for Deepak Chopra? Yeah, he's made a lot of money. Sorry, symptom of a cold. So, people like Deepak Chopra try to justify these crazy claims by adding quantum physics, which they don't understand one bit of, but because they heard scientific words, which mean that you can't understand anything, then obviously everything must be quantum physics. And of course, the appeal to nature, which I mentioned earlier, and no side effects, which we shall come to a little bit later, because anything that has its side effects will have an effect, and anything which doesn't have side effects most probably doesn't have an effect. And of course, we have this amazing craze, which is still reverberating around the world, detoxing. Detox your liver, detox your kidneys, detox everything else, when your body can do that quite well. And if it didn't, you'd be in hospital, and it would be very, very, a very serious problem, of course. And of course, alkaline and acidic. This is still going on so prevalently, I mean, throughout our country. Are you guys still hearing about alkaline and acidic drinks and diets, etc. over there? Yes, no, maybe, maybe. Could be. Over here, it is all over the place. It is so annoying. I have already done a couple of videos on this, and it's not going down. Now, most homes use Ayurveda as a complete, as if it's just a part of the way that we live, right? So for example, when I was a kid, that's me, my cousin who lives in the US in California right now, she did my hair up in that picture. She finds it very embarrassing. I'm like, yep, that was me. I was cool. That was the 80s. And I was made to have these things, these medicines that you see on your screen. So Chyawanprash is actually a very thick, gloopy, black thing, which I was forced to have every day after lunch before I got to have my chocolate. And it is vile. But apparently it's got like 50 different ingredients, and all of them are supposed to be, doing amazing things for you. I still have friends and family who are spoon feeding this to kids through wails and cries all over the place. There's before my exams, my mother made me have uh, Mentat, which I will come to in a minute. If there are any Dune followers over here, anybody who loves Dune, the Dune series of books. Oh
Dune's a
yeah.
great
Okay, we
movie
got
and books.
absolutely. So with the Mentats, of course, in the first movie, we remember these guys, right? The Mentats. Now that's called eyebrow goals. But there was also Live 52, which to this day is being manufactured. It's a proprietary supplement created by a company, this company called Himalaya, who make it, it's not even Ayurvedic. It's not even Ayurvedic, but they're promoting it as one of these Ayurvedic supplements. It's absolutely nasty. But there are a few big hitters that we want to talk about. First is ashwagandha. Ashwagandha has been going through a lot of research, and a lot of people, like especially in the gyms and fitness industries, when it comes to these extremely hormonal men who are promoting how to build your biceps and get abs and all of that. These ashwagandha is apparently a big deal there. But do we have any evidence for it? Yes, we have, but most of the studies done are on our little friendly mice models and rats and lab rats. So we haven't been able to translate that into humans yet. And even then, when we have done these tests in humans, they are still at their very nascent stages. These are just toddlers when it comes to actual evidence. We don't have anything concrete on what effect ashwagandha actually does, because we're not being able to isolate the molecules that are effective. We're just taking the whole thing and we're giving it to a bunch of people and seeing what happens. And in most cases, it's still not a good idea. The second one, which I'm sure you've heard of, is turmeric. So turmeric is actually quite good. There's this, if you've got the audio on, I hope you'll be able to hear this.
Can't hear the audio because you didn't enable it with your share.
Sorry? Audio hasn't been enabled with my share. All right, we can just skip over this. There's no problem. It's just a comedy routine, which is absolutely hilarious. If you can make a note of it, Mark Marone is confused by the world of supplements. It's on YouTube, so you should check it out. Mark Marone is confused by the world of supplements. It's absolutely hilarious. He's talking about friends who tell him that, turmeric, you should take that shit. You should take it. And he's like, but why? He's like, but you should take it because it reduces inflammation. What's that? It's basically bad stuff. Everything bad that happens to your body is inflammation, and turmeric helps you stop inflammation. Really? Oh, and if you're going to take that turmeric, make sure you have some pepper with it because that makes it more bioavailable. Really? It's just true. It's true. These things are true, except for the inflammation part. The problem is that turmeric has been found to be liver toxic when you take it with pepper. And it is also a blood thinner. So if somebody who's been taking turmeric milk or otherwise called golden milk, not the same as yellow snow, but if you're taking golden milk for goodness knows what, or you're having your turmeric latte in Starbucks or whatever other cafeteria that you're fond of, the problem is if you're going in for surgery, it will make your blood thinner and will cause problems. So therefore, if you're going for surgery, please tell your doctors that you are going to be taking turmeric for this certain period of time. You guys, I seriously doubt would want to be taking it in the first place anyway. But I'm sure your friends and families, there's somebody out there who probably loves their turmeric latte and says that it's amazing for you. But of course, the thing is, it is liver toxic. It will cause something called autoimmune liver toxicity. So you definitely don't want that to be happening. We'll come back to that in a moment. Ginkgo biloba is another thing which is being very popular. Of course, this is on the Chinese medicine side of things. But the problem is we won't go into this, but they basically, just to go back to just a moment. So when it comes to ginkgo biloba, that too has been not found to be at all effective in any way and is also liver toxic at even relatively lower dosage. So the thing is, the problem is that a lot of these medicines are actually being when they do get absorbed into your body, the first thing they do is go into your liver and they cause all sorts of havoc in there. Now, turmeric is relatively safe in small quantities because in India, we have it practically every day in our food. And one should think if it's such a magical thing that, all Indians would be super healthy, we would die in our 150s, and we'd never have any heart disease or liver damage or diabetes or anything of that sort. But we're just like the rest of the planet. We have absolutely nothing exceptional about us. So turmeric obviously doesn't have much going on as far as that's concerned. And that's the same goes for ginkgo biloba and ashwagandha. And this gentleman, his name is Dr. Abby Phillips. He is called the liver doc. And he is going all out nowadays for, fighting against these herbal remedies because he's a hepatologist. He is, as his name suggests. So Dr. Abby Phillips is a hepatologist who is currently practicing in Kerala, which is in the southern part of India. And he is going in guns blazing because he has found many people, especially after COVID, have had incredibly damaged livers, non-alcoholic liver damage, and have even come to the point where they've had to have their livers either transplanted or they have actually died due to the effects of these herbal supplements that people are taking, which are which are causing an incredible amount of harm. And the couple of things that are the main herbs that he has found, which are the prime suspects, are giloy, which is this juice that has been promoted all over the place. We'll come back to that one. Ashwagandha, aloe vera, which you can apply it to your skin. It's really good for your skin. Keep it outside your body. And of course, turmeric. So these are extremely harmful to you, especially your liver, because we do not know what the safe doses are. We definitely don't know if these things do anything at all, have any benefit at all. We don't know what their toxic doses are because people don't really regulate them because of the naturalistic fallacy. If it's natural, it won't have any side effects, but it does. It can kill people. And that's why these things should not only be studied further, but they need to be regulated as drugs. Because since these are herbal, this is not like homeopathy that you don't even have one molecule of the substance in you. In the medicine, but these are herbal medicines which vary in toxicity or vary in composition from plant to plant because we don't know what the active ingredients are. We don't know how much which plant is producing. Some plant might have a higher quantity, some plants might have a lower quantity, but these chemicals that you're just randomly taking out of plants, they're not doing anyone any good. And the effects are they could be real. We just don't know if they are. And our government has an entire ministry dedicated to promoting these alternative medicines. So as you can see, these are all ads that came out during the lockdowns of COVID. They were promoting this extremely strongly, including oil pulling, which is just taking some oil in your mouth and hoping that does something. Apparently cleaner teeth, which is that does not make any sense whatsoever. Use a toothbrush. Golden milk, as we can see, mixture of kadha, which is the concoction of different herbs which are put into one thing, and of course, as you can see, chawanprash, which is 1 tablespoonful or teaspoonful. 2 teaspoonfuls, or the 10 grams and 1 teaspoonful doesn't make any sense. Sorry. This is a government. This is a government leaflet. They're also practicing yoga and meditation and pranayam. Pranayam is a breathing thing, which basically pranayam is a practice of different breathing exercises, which my dad swears by the way. Says that stopped him from snoring. But pranayam is supposed to be able to, energize your prana, which is your life force, through these breathing activities, because prana actually means breath of life. And these are also being sold by the ton by a bunch of companies for almost every form of illness you can think about it, for cancer, for balding, for obesity, for any random thing that you can think of. And of course, the whole thing also went crazy during the pandemic when this company, you see this odd looking fella in the orange, his name is Baba Ramdev. And even though he's a yogi and he practices yoga, he founded a company called Patanjali, which is probably one of India's biggest companies when it comes to, these, what do you call them? Fast moving consumer goods, FMCG. So when it comes to, he sells everything from fairness lotions to rice to ghee, which is good. I don't mind ghee, to cow urine, uh, cow poop, and a variety of other wonderful things, including genes. Somehow, I think they were planning on coming out with all natural herbal genes at some point. I think it was. But with this COVID cure, they claimed that this was 100% effective in curing COVID. 100%, which is mind blowing. What do? They basically got a bunch of people to take the medicine, and a week later, none of them have had COVID because none of them were in the risk categories of getting COVID, because COVID was only lethal to certain risk categories, and that too to what? 3% of the population. So 97% of the people weren't going to have anything anyway. But they still said that this is what works, and they got a huge amount of sales. They were doing they had an official launch party which had people from the Ministry of Health to come and attend, not just somebody from the Ministry of Health. The boss, he came to the launch event, and then later on, after a lot of questioning, they were asked to prove that this was a cure, because their papers were very preliminary, and all the ingredients, I looked through all the studies of all the individual ingredients to these concoctions, and all the studies were either just computer models, or they were done on rats, or they were done on rabbits. None of those and then that was a very small, very limited studies. So, and they're saying, oh, everything is scientific. But unfortunately, this in a microcosm is what the entire Ayurvedic industry is doing, to say that they're evidence-based. Basically, they're not doing the science in the right manner. There's, of course, okay, this is a nice little GIF of Baba Ramdev falling off a bicycle, but I'll skip that for now. As I was saying, they're published only in very biased journals, usually small journals, just to get their study up on PubMed. Their peer review is done by other Ayurvedic doctors, which is basically worthless. They often cite each other's work when it comes to their studies. They're small sizes, not blinded or blinded badly. These are either in vitro, which is in the lab, or in animal or computer models. Placebo controls are almost non-existent or inadequate. And since these modern illnesses, they don't even know the actual reason for them. They still think it's humors. How can they properly diagnose these or treat them? And plus, they're not isolating in individual molecules. They're just putting this whole plant into a person and seeing what happens. Not even into a person, into a rat or into a petri dish. So we really don't know how they work. So because they just say that, Ayurveda is special because we don't need these evidences for it. It's already been proven for 2,000 years of practice. So evidence-based is nothing but some sort of systematic assessment of evidence that may be a single isolated instance called as a case study or a case report. This is the kind of stuff that they publish, that it's not, these are actually much more complicated than science will ever know. Yeah, right. But it's not all bad because we know that a lot of natural substances have given rise to some absolutely monumental treatments like aspirin from the willow tree. We've got morphine from opium. We've got penicillin, which came out of a natural fungus, which was growing a mold, which was growing on a petri dish. And of course, chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, Trump's favorite, which was taken from the cinchona bark of the tree of a cinchona, sorry, the bark of a cinchona tree, which, it just, I mean, so there's a lot of potential that Ayurveda has. There's so many different substances that they use and are mass producing them at, constantly. So if we just did what modern medicine just let modern medicine do what it needs to do, it could actually be quite helpful to remove the dogma from it, because that is the only thing that is driving Ayurveda at this point of time. And we could just let science do its thing. But unfortunately, the practitioners and the people who are promoting it are too scared that they will lose their ground if science was really allowed to do anything with the Ayurvedic preparations that are going around. Of course, I would have loved to touch on things like, yoga and other forms, but I think we can definitely do that another time. But as of now, that is the presentation. And that is everything that one needs to know about Ayurveda. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Great. Thank you very much, Abhijit.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Lots of applause here. Eric said, excellent presentation. My observation was a lot of these products you discussed are prevalent in India. And how is the Indian regulatory agencies basically ignored science in coming up with approving these products?
The odd thing is that our organization is called the FSSAI, which is the Indian version of the FDA. It still is biased because the government is biased, because we have a ministry for alternative medicine. So they are taking Ayurvedic medicines as just supplements. And so it goes through that loophole just like any other supplement. The problem also lies with the fact that most of these Ayurvedic preparations don't have any real claim. Like the Patanjali people who were trying to sell this as a proper cure, they were the ones who were stopped because they said that you've made a serious claim, now you have to prove it. So then they just downgraded everything to immunity booster. So something as vague as that, which nobody really knows what it means, but that's how they managed to slip through. That's what they all do.
So along those lines, do you see anything similar use of that supplement approach in other countries? I guess we would be concerned what's going on in the U.S.
Absolutely. You guys have got, I mean, all the supplements that are coming out, like your ginkgo biloba, your ashwagandha. You remember what happened with what's his name? Dr. Oz, right? He was throwing out every single supplement that came his way without even asking for it to be tested. But finally, Congress had to come and nail him down, but the companies got away safe. The companies are still out there selling their stuff because it's a supplement that is not making any direct claims. It is just supporting the regular medicine that you're taking without causing too much of a fuss.
Mm-hmm. So I did have a question here in the chat from Kay related to another topic. What are your thoughts about intermittent fasting? And
I stopped the screen share as I was requested.
yeah, and then what do you think about intermittent fasting?
I think intermittent fasting has a lot of benefits because, but not in the way that the people who are promoting intermittent fasting say it has. It's basically you're just shortening the span of time that you need to eat. So therefore, your chances of snacking outside that time are minimized. So you focus on what you have to eat, what you should be eating within that window. But it's not magic. So if you are eating higher calories than you're burning within your eating window, then it won't do any good, which is unfortunately happened to me because I did it for quite a while because I was just involuntarily doing intermittent fasting because I anyways don't have multiple meals in a day. I have 2 meals in a day. So I just squished them a little closer together. Didn't do me any good. Why? Because I was eating a lot of pork.
Cool. So
I wish it worked.
Fred had raised his hand with a question.
Actually, I have a couple comments.
Mhm.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
One of the things I think, two things driving these alternative medicine crazes are, one is people will clutch at straws. People look for an easy way out, from problems. Or they, years ago, Cher, the singer, did a commercial for
Yeah.
a gym, and she said, if a body like this could be found in a pill, who needs gyms? But she was basically saying you have to work, you have to do the work.
Absolutely.
As a dentist, I had people come years ago and ask me about oil pulling to stop cavities, and I never heard of it. And they were saying, all you have to do is rinse with the right type of oil. It couldn't be almond oil, it may be coconut oil. There was just no science behind it. And it is also the other driving factor behind this is greed. I mean, these companies,
Absolutely.
they prey on people who will clutch at straws. Years ago, back in the late 80s, there was a scare about mercury in silver amalgam fillings.
Yeah.
And there's concern about it, but it's not a problem. It's been proven epidemiologically, scientifically. But there were dentists coming out with devices that would examine the galvanic charges in your teeth. And if you don't remove the silver fillings, the silver mercury fillings in the right sequence, it will cause brain damage. They were
Oh
advertising
boy.
this. They lost their licenses, but they saw people who would clutch at straws, and they came up with these crazy schemes to promote themselves and probably put some science-sounding words behind it. So it's really,
Yeah.
and in New York
Even
State, there was a study a number of years ago. Independent laboratory analyzed hundreds of supplements, and they found that like 80% of them did not have the ingredients advertised.
absolutely. And we have that problem in India too. Like Dr.
It's,
Abby Phillips, who had mentioned earlier, he has been doing a lot of testing for, he set up a lab and a group of his own, which is a research facility that tests ingredients in these different products. And he's been going through a lot of them, and he's found not only steroids but actual hormones and other forms of medicine, actual medicine, in these alternative medicine preparations, which are somehow giving them, which are finally getting the results that the people are looking for, but these are not regulated. These are not given as per dosage, and they're just being stuck in there randomly with all the other stuff, and God knows what kind of effect that can have on people. It has killed people, and genuinely it has.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem.
Yeah, thank you.
And one thing which I didn't mention about Ayurveda earlier is that a lot of the preparations actually have what is called pasam, which is, it basically means ash. So it's a metal ash. So you're supposed to heat these certain types of metal, which include mercury, not the type that go in the vaccines. And it also has, things, different types of metals like lead and other heavy metals, which you're heating to extreme temperatures, are oxidizing, and then mixing it into the preparation. And these can actually cause and have caused heavy metal poisoning in a lot of people, but they're not getting into it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. We had a question from Eric in the chat. Is there any evidence that OTC probiotics are beneficial?
OTC, over the counter probiotics. Yes. There is some evidence, but it's not very strong. It does seem to, there's some studies which seem to say that, if you're taking over the counter probiotics, that can help in repopulating your internal biome. But what seems to be slightly more beneficial is not taking these pills, which might be effective. We're really not sure about it, but having more fermented foods like, you know, kombucha or sauerkraut or kimchi, these kinds of fermented foods do aid in repopulating your gut microbiome. As far as the medicines are concerned, we are not too sure. What is definitely beneficial are prebiotics. So if you're having a good amount of fiber in your diet, whatever survivors you have had from maybe a dose of antibiotics or something from a stomach infection, which I had last week. But if you're taking a decent amount of fiber, whether it's in a supplement form, like that, what do you call mycomucil, and or fruits and veggies, then you should be fine on the whole.
Thank you. Andy had a comment and question about something that's been in the news lately in the U.S. Oral phenylphedrine, which is a decongestant over the counter, was recently declared ineffective by the FDA. It was long used. Personally, if I had a congestion, I always went and asked the pharmacist for the stuff that really worked.
Yeah.
So Andy's question is, and I think you touched on some of these, any other over-the-counter drugs that are ineffective?
Wow, those it really depends. It depends on the product. I think most of the time these multivitamins are pretty much known as extremely expensive way to have expensive pills. Basically, you just, if you don't have any deficiencies of any sort, then there's really no need to take them. If you have a serious deficiency and you're feeling its effects for some reason, if the doctor has recommended that you take a certain supplement, just take that one vitamin which you might need. Vitamin D is one vitamin which a lot of people need because, we are staying locked up in our houses during the COVID pandemic. I work from home, so I'm inside most of the time. And in India, you don't want to go outside either. So it's either too damn hot or it's too damn polluted. A great supplement to have, and things like over the counter, but and also vitamin B12 for vegans and vegetarians. Other than that, I don't think nothing else comes to mind, but that could be a couple of things. Definitely don't need the multivites.
Okay, thank you. So we had a couple comments here from Kay. First, it's important to become educated about intermittent fasting to make it successful. It is a lifestyle, not a quick fix. And she recommends Dr. Jason Fung as a resource.
Yeah, I've seen him.
He also has a comment here. With so many people turning from traditional medicine to alternative medicine, it may be time to address our broken medical systems. Most medical schools only spend 10 to 20 hours on nutrition. I believe that that has such an effect on this whole broken system.
Yeah, in fact, I think even in India, we don't have, our system of medicine is completely different. But the fact is that it is mostly science-based, and we just don't have the resources. Even if we do have the resources, we're not motivated enough to push those resources into the far recesses of our country, with, deep rural areas where people have absolutely no access to medicine. The fundamental problem is that not only is our population biased towards alternative medicine, so are our doctors. I've had doctors, Indian doctors, who have been trying to give me turmeric to reduce inflammation when I know for a fact that it doesn't work, but they think it does. And as I mentioned in the research at the very beginning of the presentation, is that the primary problem is not the medical system, which the US medical system definitely needs repair. It needs to take those functions, certain control functions, away from the pharmaceutical companies, away from the insurance companies, and be able to control that centrally so that more people have access to the medicine that they need at more reasonable costs. I totally agree with that. But at the same time, the research seems to have shown that it's people who are more alternative focused, who are already have belief systems, which consist of the naturalistic fallacy, like, that everything that is natural is better. So therefore, Ayurveda is becoming more popular, naturopathy is becoming more popular, and both of these practices have taken lives. Chiropractic has become more popular, even though the actual straightforward chiropractors who actually think that all disease doesn't stem from your chi or from anything else, it stems from your spine. That also has extreme effects that are, quite problematic, which is actually, it's dislocated people's necks in certain cases. It's caused strokes in other people. And the naturopaths have actually poisoned people by injecting vitamin C directly into their veins. These are practices that are not just because of the broken medical system, but it is because the lack of critical thinking is not immunizing enough people. I mean, the critical thinking is not immunizing enough people to be able to think for themselves and choose better medicine for their ailments. They are trying to go for solutions that they feel more comfortable with because they are already believing that natural solutions are better solutions, when medicine has no problem taking ideas from nature. We are always, the research is ongoing for a fight for, to fight cancer, and for so many other diseases we haven't figured out. But it just, I think it's the critical thinking is the first thing that needs to be instilled, and that might lead to better decisions made by the government, by private companies, because then when the people have a voice and they start speaking out against these alternative medicines, then I think change can happen for sure. As far as Jason Fung is concerned, I have checked out some of his videos. I've watched several of his videos, and I have also, and it is very convincing when he talks about, things like autophagy, etc., etc. But the thing with Dr. Jason Fung is, first of all, he's not as evidence-based as he mentions, because the mainstream science also has a lot of contradictions against the things that he's saying. So when I watch something, I try to watch something else that contradicts those claims, to basically try and understand which one might not only be plausible at face value, but what actually has evidence that backs it up with. There are a lot of studies out there, as we saw with Ayurveda. There's a lot of studies that people have come up with, but are they in reputed journals? Are they properly peer reviewed? Are they well structured? What is the scientific consensus that supports these practices, like intermittent fasting? Because they are not magic. Intermittent fasting only works because it's restricting the time of your caloric intake, therefore possibly providing a caloric deficit, which is what will help you lose weight. Autophagy happens when your calories go down and when you're on a calorie restricted diet as well. So that means your cells start dying and eating and cleaning up basically the dead cells in the body. That's what autophagy is. But that happens when you're on a calorie deficit as well. So it doesn't really make too much of a difference which form of calorie restriction you want to take. You can take it. It's just whatever is the most sustainable for you is the most effective way to do it. I am extremely bad at that sort of thing, but I'm trying out different methods. And right now, I've actually started taking Ozempic, which I know is very popular in the US, and is actually taking medicines out of the people, out of the hands of the people who actually need them, because of, it's just become a Hollywood craze right now. But I'm taking Ozempic because I have a family history of heart disease. I'm in my 40s. I'm overweight, which I'm trying to lose right now. But it's very complicated because I have other issues which are not letting me lose the weight that I want to lose. And I'm also pre-diabetic. So I am in the classification of people who are recommended for this, and it has been prescribed to me by a doctor. So I'm using that as well, just to see if that helps me, go in the right direction.
Mhm. Thank you. Joe has a question. What about the people who are not capable of critical thinking, i.e., below 100 on the bell curve?
Well, we see, I think when it comes to, the relatively, first of all, it's uncomfortable for me to think that people who are not smart are not thinking critically, because there is no correlation between how smart you might be or how intelligent you might be and your critical thinking skills. Because, as you know, Steve Jobs, definitely one of the smartest people on our planet that has existed, he was a complete alternative medicine fanatic. He had absolutely no perspective when it came to what would actually be good for him and what not, which is what, unfortunately, at the end took his life. Similarly, we can find people of every cultural background, of every age group, of every religious background, who have stumbled upon ideas of thinking more critically and being more skeptical. And it is something that we see across the world, and it even in India, from people who are, the people who are relatively from my social status, which is relatively higher up, and have had better education, are also have a higher tendency to gravitate towards alternative medicine. Whereas people in the lower categories will go for anything that can help solve the problem, take as much money as you want. Whatever they can afford, they will get. It is the factor is not about intelligence. It is about the critical thinking skills that we are trying to get out there. That's why I do what I do. That's why everyone there in your group does what they do. They are talking to friends and families. We are talking to our people in our communities, and trying to help people think more critically about their everyday, day-to-day decisions that they have to make, whether it's the food that you're having, whether it's your golden milk, whether it's your turmeric latte, whether it's your homeopathic medicines, which you keep on your bedside. I had an aunt who had an entire bedside cabinet just covered with homeopathic medicines. My parents didn't know about the alternative medicine side of things, the science of it, until I spoke to them about it. Now, they are not going to make the same mistakes. They are not going to be going to a homeopath or an Ayurved for their treatments. They are going to stick to mainstream medicine. That's what's helped us. That's what we're continuing with. And that's what we all have to try and spread it out as much as possible. And by the way, IQ, I don't know how effective the IQ score is, just as a side note. There is a lot of questioning about it. There's a very interesting video by Veritasium on YouTube, which has brought us some very important questions, which has made me question whether IQ tests are legitimate in the first place. So you might want to have a look at that as well, I'm still not certain where the IQ test thing falls, but that video is a very good place to start at. I definitely ask you to check that out.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the comments or chat. Nobody here. Oh, Frank has a question. Frank, come up. Come up and speak to the microphone.
Can't hear him.
Take your own. Read it like an ice cream cone.
I would suggest that people who go to alternative medicine actually think they're being smarter. They think that they are seeing through the lure of the commonplace everyday medicine, and they're actually doing something that is better for them. And we see that in a lot of aspects of society these days.
Thank you. Yeah,
It's very true. In fact, I would say that a lot of the people who are fans of alternative medicine have a certain propensity to have this conspiracy theory kind of thinking, where they're thinking that the pharmaceutical companies are after them, after their money. They want to keep them sick. And I don't like, I do see why certain people would think that. Because there's a problem with, with people not trusting not only their government, but also the corporations who are controlling the amount of pharmaceuticals that they're getting and the rates that they're getting them at. And it's a horrible thing. And then one universal problem among, I think, all mainstream medicine doctors is that not all doctors, hashtag not all doctors, but a lot of doctors who treat their services as a factory line. You get a patient in, see what the problem is, say, take a temperature, write a prescription, thank you, get out. Next. And it's just that becomes a huge problem. One of the reasons why alternative medicine practitioners are definitely have become, people have become more fond of them, is because they sit down, they talk to you through everything, they understand your lifestyle, your habits. How many kids do you have? Do you have a pet in the house? Oh, hee hee ha ha. Like, it's just, they really get to know you. They make that effort to not only get to know you, but help you understand how the medicine will help you. And that is a rare quality to find in a mainstream doctor. I'm very fortunate to have found a couple of them, and I'm sticking with them. But that is a very important factor of providing health advice and prescriptions that is just not given enough importance these days, I think.
Okay, we have a comment in the room from Olga.
I want to thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. Thank you. I'm
Thank you very
wondering
much.
if you have thank you. I'm wondering if you have any opinion about chiropractic. I have a very conflicted feelings about it, because if you look at how that practice was invented, it's very similar to the story you told about the man who just had this amazing discovery in 20 days. And this is kind of how chiropractic happened at the same time. I myself had used it with very good results in a particular crisis, so I'm guilty as charged. But unfortunately, at least in the United States, many practitioners claim that they can fix everything. So when it has to do with musculoskeletal system, it seems to have some, at least as a placebo, or maybe as an actual practice, it seems to help quite a few folks. But when chiropractors claim that they can help ear infections in children by adjusting their spines, as a speech pathologist, I've seen quite a few families who've used that. It's dangerous. And they claim that they can fix infectious diseases, which is very scary. So I'm just wondering if you have any opinion or knowledge about that practice.
Yeah, thank you for that. Chiropractic is actually something it's a little bit more complicated because, as I said, there are straight chiropractors who, don't quote my terminology. This is what I think I've picked up. There are people who are basically hardline chiropractors who take their initial dogma that all diseases come from the spine, and they use that to treat everything. So whenever you come to a practitioner who says that this will treat everything, be skeptical, because even mainstream medicine doctors have specialities. Not one doctor who can do everything, and no one chiropractor can do everything. The complication happens because there are a lot of chiropractors who have strayed off the main course of chiropractic and actually have taken the trouble of learning some physiotherapy, which actually provides certain benefits to their patients or their clients. So they do provide certain manipulations, etc., which are beneficial. But why would you risk literally breaking your neck to going to a person who might give you the right treatment, whereas you can just go to a physiotherapist who will definitely, most certainly, high probability of giving you the right treatment. So I think chiropractic is one example of an alternative medicine that has, with some practitioners, tried to kind of change with the times and conform with science to a certain extent. Osteopathy has definitely done so. It has definitely gained a lot more credibility So it's definitely more, you can probably go with an osteopath with more certainty. But chiropractic, especially with the kind of Twitter trends and Instagram and TikTok trends that are going on with people going, and they're giving chiropractic treatments to dogs and children, that really makes me grit my teeth, because I really don't know what's going to happen, especially these neck treatments. There are certain nerves and veins going through your spinal cord around these areas, which, if pinched, you would either lead to a stroke, it can lead to paralysis, or even death. So do not risk chiropractic as far as I'm concerned. Just go to a physiotherapist who knows what he's doing.
Thank you. Kay had another comment for you about intermittent fasting. She starts, the proof is in the pudding, sir. I live intermittent fasting and low carb, and it has changed my life. It is now changing my husband's life after he argued with me about it for years. His new traditional med doctor lives it too. Doctors told me to restrict calories, move more. Mentality didn't work for me.
Okay, so Kay, I think more power to you. If it's working for you, that's fantastic. I'm really glad something's helping, because there are a lot of people, we run around and we try to find different things and they just don't work usually. But the important thing to remember is that the whole eat less, move more is also a flawed, oversimplified statement. The essential takeaway is you should consume fewer calories than you are expending. So therefore, how do you increase your expenditure of calories and lower your intake of calories? If you do both, you have a higher chance of losing more weight over time. So, for example, I do heavy weightlifting. So bodybuilding, not bodybuilding, but like my exercise is basically resistance training. So that is my effort to increase my muscle mass. Or have more muscle. Muscle is a very hungry tissue. It consumes more calories even when you're doing nothing. So I try to do more of that. You don't necessarily have to move more in that manner. But the key thing is that you've found a technique that works for you. But all I said was, it's not magic. It will just help you constrict calories in a way that you are comfortable. Some people do it with, an elimination diet, which I think is also very unhealthy. Like, the keto diet, which just gets rid of all starches, which I don't think is particularly healthy or enjoyable for that matter. And it's also expensive, because meat's expensive. So I'd like to go with an intermittent fasting technique as well, with controlled meal portions. And that usually works for me on the long term. So if this works for you, fantastic. I'm really glad it did. But it's not magic. It's just calorie restriction in a different wrapping.
Okay, thank you. Along the lines of intermittent fasting, William London had put some skepticism about intermittent fasting, a link to a website from Harvard. If anybody's interested in it, you can look in the chat and see that.
Yeah, and in fact, have any of you been, have you followed the Skeptoid podcast by any chance?
Nobody,
No?
I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Okay. So the Skeptoid podcast is fantastic, by the way. It's just 15 minutes of like deep dives into all sorts of claims when it comes to whether it's diets, not that much diets, but mostly, ghost stories, UFO encounters, abductions, astrology, homeopathy, and a huge variety of, subjects that he covers. And I met him in the 2018 PsyCon in Vegas, and for the first time. And he told me he was doing intermittent fasting, alternate day. Which I was like, really? You? And at that point of time, I was a little bit more of a skeptic than I am now. Now I'm like, dude, whatever works for you, it's fine. But he just found that worked for him at that period of time. I don't know how sustainable it is to not eat for an entire day and then go nuts the next day. But if it works for you, it's fine. Like, just be careful. Make sure you check in with your doctor every now and then to make sure nothing's going, haywire. Just you do you. It's all good.
So we have a question in the room from Jane. Treat it like a microphone. Treat it like an ice cream cone.
No licking.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi.
This has been a really wonderful presentation. I like to see the person I'm
So glad.
talking with. So I agree with you. Critical thinking as a skill, and I don't think that there's a huge dependency on intellect for that. But I do believe that there's an emotional component that is probably the largest challenge, and this goes for alternative medicines as well as religion. It's really hard to live in life with doubt and to be constantly questioning and not having that certainty. And people have difficulty living with just the sheer terror of living sometimes. And the whole thing that, the alternative medicine gives them hope, a way out, like as if we're going to get out of this alive. We're not. We're all going to die. So, but they have trouble living with that reality.
Yeah.
And I feel like that plays more into this anyway. And if I had to say, fear would probably be the primary emotion fueling all of this. Comments?
I think that's definitely a very important factor in a lot of people who are choosing alternative medicine, because some people are like, because the problem with just science in general and even medicine is that nobody can make 100% like claim. We can't say that this is 100% cure, this is 100% effective. We saw this during the vaccines during COVID. The percentages kept coming down. The longer the vaccine was in the population, the percentages kept coming down, because even with climate change, there is always a wiggle room of a couple of percentage points. And people just think those 2 percentage points, because you're not 100% sure that it's not going to work. So that comfort that they get from an alternative practitioner saying this is 100% effective with 0% side effects is very appealing, because then you're like, wow, that sounds solid. Except it's exactly the opposite, because they're lying. And either they're lying, or they truly believe their own, fairy tales. And which is the case in many occasions, that, people are genuinely they genuinely believe that their product works, and they have never questioned it. And that is the case with almost every alternative practice, or even spiritual healers, energy healers, astrologers. A lot of them believe in their own skills, that it actually works. So they're not necessarily lying. But yeah, it is something that is very attractive to a lot of people. Plus, with a lot of families and a lot of people, it is an indoctrination. For example, like when the medicines that I was given as a kid, this Chyawanprash and Mentat and Live 52, and all of these things that were given to me when I was a kid. And we gave it to our pup when he had infantile, liver cirrhosis, infantile jaundice. My brother had it after he'd had like a couple of weeks of binge partying, and it's just gone absolutely nuts, and he was feeling a little worse for wear. This is automatically what we reach for, because if our parents have been taking it, we start taking it, and it becomes like an indoctrination. So whether you're indoctrinated from childhood, whether you are a convert in later years, whether you've joined a cult like the essential oils and stuff like that you guys have over there. We have essential oils. We just don't use it like that. We just use it to make our room smell nicer. But for all of these things, it is almost like a religious indoctrination in many different forms. And the pushback you get when you question someone for believing in that is almost like a religious pushback of like, hey man, it worked for me. I gave it to my dog, it worked for them. I gave it to my kids who don't know what the placebo effect is, and it works for them too. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. It's just the placebo effect is extremely strong, and so is your confirmation bias. That's just the way it is.
Yes, very much. And we all tend to believe things that support our beliefs.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you very
And we have to
much.
always falsify that.
Oh, we have one more. No. Oh, we had another question in here. I guess not. I want to thank you again, Abhijit. It was very insightful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We do appreciate your time. I know it's probably late where you are now.
Just after midnight.
So you should, we want to thank you again. We do appreciate your time.
Yeah. My pleasure. My pleasure. I slept late. I'm on lots of coffee and Red Bull, so I'm good. All good.
Another one of those homeopathic medicines, right?
Yeah. One.
They work.
Absolutely. The less of it you take, the better it works. So I took none. Beat that.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking
Glad
to you
to.
all. Thank you very much.